Good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock sharp, and we're streaming this seminar. And so I'd like to start with welcoming all of you who join us online, but also everybody who's joining us in real life. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this seminar on how the Swedish mining cluster can strengthen Europe's supply of metals and minerals. My name is Sylvia Schwag-Surger. I'm president of the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences. And it is my privilege and my pleasure to again welcome you to this extremely timely seminar. The Academy's mission is to promote engineering and economic sciences and the advancement of business and industry for the benefit of society. In other words, we strive to support sustainable development and strengthen Sweden's competitiveness. And we've done so for over 100 years, and we are the oldest engineering academy in the world, to my knowledge. Right now, we're in the midst of a technological shift to move away from fossil fuel dependency of our societies towards a renewable energy supply. This shift will have far-reaching consequences around the globe. And these consequences and the tensions that arise when shifts such as these happen are evident in the mounting geopolitical tensions between the US, China, Europe, but also the global South. It is also obvious in Sweden, with all the ongoing significant industrial investments in battery production, green steel produced without emitting carbon dioxide, mining and processing of rare earths and critical metals. And I think all of us who follow the news, which I think we all are right now, and if you saw what happened at the Munich Security Conference last week, it becomes just clearer by the day how critical these issues are to Europe's future, resilience, prosperity, and ability to protect itself. Our flagship project, Roadmap for Metals and Minerals, has engaged over 80 experts from among the Academy's fellows, from academia, industry, NGOs, and government. We have regularly discussed our work with the members of parliament of all political parties. And importantly, in this project, we have also established an international reference group with knowledgeable people from all over the world, of which some of us, I think, are joining us today. We presented our conclusions and recommendations after more than 2 years to a Swedish audience in a seminar in last October. In our seminar and in this work that we've been carrying out, we concluded that it is extremely important, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, that Sweden rapidly accelerates Europe's efforts to become more self-sufficient in terms of metals and minerals, and also that Sweden can and should take a leading role in Europe's supply of metals and minerals. Today, we present our results to an international audience, since we believe that Sweden, with an internationally unique mining cluster, can play this role for Europe, but also for other parts of the world, to secure the supply of metals and minerals necessary for the energy transition, but also for equitable global development. I look very much forward to stimulating and interesting discussions, giving an international take on the project and its proposals and recommendations. And with this, I would like to hand over to Charlotte Anderson and Magnus Eriksson, who will moderate the discussion. Both have been deeply engaged in the project since its inception. So please come up to the floor. Thank you.
So thank you to our president for that nice introduction. And once again, welcome to all of you attending both here in the room and also all of you online. So today the focus will be on the international perspective, on our possibility, so Sweden's possibility, to contribute to a sustainable supply of metals and minerals. And this, of course, was also the purpose of this project. So this project sort of started several years ago with a discussion on how we in the Royal Academy of Engineering Sciences can contribute to this sector. And I think, as we heard in the introduction, it's becoming more and more the topic right now. So, we have a number of challenges today. The demand for metals and minerals are increasing, and at the same time, we are depending on imports. And as we all know, global value chains are vulnerable. And for some of these materials, in particular critical raw materials, there is a high market concentration. And to secure necessary investments in Sweden is risky and takes a long time. And the recycling rate of some of these elements are almost non-existent. So this is our starting point that we will start with to discuss and that we had in the roadmap. So just to take a closer look at this, we can see in this figure here that the market concentration for some of the critical raw materials is concentrated to a small number of players. I should maybe say a small number of countries. And then we are not only talking about extraction, we're also talking about processing. And this is, of course, very interesting because we cannot only see that all our material, all our minerals and metals are coming from primary sources. We also need recycled materials. So let's look at that. This is one of the figures that we have in the report, in the roadmap, showing the recycling input rate for critical raw materials in the European Union. And if you take a close look, many of them are close to zero. So, connecting back to Sweden a bit then, and the Nordics, what can we do, or what are we already doing? We have several mines, as I think many of you know. And in this figure, you can see that despite how small our size is, part of the total production is quite large. For some of the very important metals for modern society, like, for example, iron ore, or lead, or copper. We're not only have these mines, they're also among the most efficient in the world. So we both have the mines and they're also very efficient. But now we're talking about more metals that have been in production for quite some time. So what about the critical raw materials then? We have known deposits of these, and we have the geological potential for all of these. Well, now you've seen what we have. We have mines, they are efficient. We also have a lot of deposits, but connecting this to the Nordic mining cluster, it's not only the geological potential, it's also all the companies. And by that I mean both companies, mines, and also in processing, but also we have some of the world's largest equipment suppliers when it comes to mining equipment, as well as recycling companies, and above this we also have a connection to strong academia. So we also have the ecosystem that you need to be able to move this further. So just some main conclusions to start this work. The main conclusion is that we have the possibility, as was said, to contribute to a sustainable access to metals and minerals. And the roadmap also ended up with 6 suggestions on how to move forward with this. So it is that Sweden should take a leading role in Europe's supply of metals and minerals. We should strengthen the Swedish mining technology and recycling industries, simplify for reuse and material recycling, create new international strategic partnership and strengthen existing ones. Develop and streamline authorization processes and tools to manage conflicts, and wide-ranging investments in knowledge, research, and innovation in metals and minerals. With this, I will leave the floor. To start with, I will invite my colleague and IVA Fellow, Magnus Eriksson, to the floor. Please, Magnus, join me if you want to add something else, except this as said. Otherwise, we will start from the global overview. Right. How can the Swedish, this one. The perspective of international organization on Swedish mining and industry. So please, our first guest, you are most welcome. I would like to invite Sven Renner, welcome. And Deborah Andrews, please, welcome. And with us online, we also have Rod Eggett. And I will leave it to Magnus to continue this interesting discussion with you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. It's great to see so many friends here, and I hope a few on the web as well. We are going to have discussions which are to a very large extent based on what we already have presented. So we are assuming that all of you are already experts, and now we will give you the final twist. And the focus will be global initially, and then we will gradually work our way down to have a Nordic and Finnish-Swedish perspective at the very end here. We will have 3 sort of sessions, and in between there will be a little break. You will have to remain here, all of you, but we will change the people here on the stage. And I would like to start simply with Professor Rod Eggett. He's with us on the screen, on the web here. Rod has been with part of our group of reference already since the very start. And Rod, I'd like to start to ask you, when you came here, we started the project, we had a kickoff in March, I think it was 2023, 2 years ago, and you made a little presentation, an important one for that matter, and you concluded, you had 4 conclusions: that the future is uncertain. I think we can all agree to that. Secondly, there will be a strong increase in metals demand, so at least one aspect of the future is certain. And you also said we shouldn't focus only on the mining or the extractive part. It's all a matter of supply chain. And finally, you divided your discussion into a long-term perspective and a short-term perspective, and you linked that to industrial policy and globalization. So, Rod, what has changed since that 2 years ago? Are you still happy with that 4 points, or I hope you have something to revise or add?
Well, first of all, can you hear me?
Right.
Okay, excellent. It's great to be here with you today. I'm sorry that I cannot participate in person, but marvel at the wonders of modern technology. Much has changed over 2 years, but I think certain things have stayed largely the same. And the introductory points, I think, broadly speaking, are not much different than they were 2 years ago. The future is uncertain, perhaps more uncertain now than we expected it might be over the last, or 2 years ago, given in particular the change in political administrations in the United States, and we can talk more about that later. It's still about supply chains and not just mining. I talked about the short run and the long run, and these are 2 related but somewhat different issues. We have the short-run concern that we are prone to disruption and surprise because of the lack of diversity geographically in current production capacity. That's somewhat different than the longer-term concern that we may not have 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now supplies and production capacity of the right type. We want it to be sufficient to meet emerging demands. We want supplies to be secure. We want them to be sustainable in an environmental sense, and we want them to be responsibly produced in a more social sense, and all of this in a way that's affordable to customers. Probably the thing that I made in my opening remarks that has changed the most was something you didn't mention. That is, according to my notes, I talked about a little bit about our reconsideration of globalization and industrial policy. How do we feel about a fully globalized economy or a hyper-globalized economy? And how do we view the appropriate role of government? And I think there, I've been surprised at the breakdown of and the degree of reimagination of globalization, and particularly in the United States, at least the emphasis of the new administration on bilateral relationships as opposed to multilateral initiatives. And in terms of industrial policy, I think most countries have questioned more than I would have anticipated the role for market forces and are much more amenable to aggressive and muscular even government intervention in many markets, in particular critical minerals and materials. And I think I'll stop there.
So you mentioned that already now, Rod, the influence of the new president, and you are the deputy director of the Critical Materials Innovation Hub. How long will you survive, not you personally, but the hub?
You know, let me say, I should have said this at the beginning. Everything I say is my personal views, even though I receive some support from the U.S. government. I'm not a government employee and not in a position to represent the government. I would say the issue of critical minerals and materials and the priority given to it has received significant bipartisan support in the United States, although clearly with the Trump administration, one might expect a greater emphasis on domestic U.S. mining and mineral processing as opposed to international initiatives. As I said before, there'll be more focus on bilateral negotiations and arrangements between the United States and other individual nations. There was something called, or I think is still something called the Mineral Security Partnership that came to the fore during the Biden administration. Some have and this is a mechanism through which like-minded countries can come together to work together to solve what are inevitably multinational and international issues related to mining and mineral processing. Some have speculated that the Mineral Security Partnership will disappear. Well, in fact, as of earlier today, there is still a web page for the Mineral Security Partnership. And I might note that during the first Trump administration, there was something analogous to the Mineral Security Partnership. So I expect that this will, some sort of international initiatives will be retained and expand and at least furthered during the new Trump administration.
Right. Well, I'm glad to hear that not everything will be closed down like USAID, for example. But let me turn to the bilateral aspects. Here in Sweden, as our eminent main moderator, Charlotte, has discussed, we have an excellent research in academia, in industry. In your views, Rod, how could we go on down that bilateral route with the US? What should we do here to be sure that we can stay in the US loop, so to say?
Well, I think certainly with respect to education and workforce development, so university to university interactions, I think will be favored. I think initiatives related to technological innovation will not be diminished, particularly early stage research. And I think activities involving geological survey organizations, activities aimed at furthering our understanding of the subsurface, I think there will still be opportunities in this area. So universities, technological R&D, and geological survey activities.
What about, I mean, you're in mineral economics, mineral policy, as we heard from our CEO of the Academy, the geopolitical aspects are going to take the front of the stage. Is there room in that area as well, you think?
Well, I think so. As your moderator indicated, I think national security and economic security concerns are driving the discussion in the United States, and I hope we all agree that the United States and the Nordic countries have a number of similar interests, and I would hope that we can continue to operate or cooperate and collaborate. I have to say I have no special insight into the priorities and specific plans of the new administration beyond what all of us have read in the press.
Right. Let me turn to a more detailed, if you like, issue. We have noticed that the number of critical raw materials is increasing. Actually, for the European Union, if you draw a line, you can predict that in the next version of the criticality assessment, there will be a number of additional critical raw materials. What drives this? You've got half a minute to answer that, Rod.
I would focus less on lists and more on the nuance and shades of gray. I would be the first to admit that with the expansion of the lists of critical raw materials, the designation critical has become less and less meaningful. It almost suggests that we should strike that word from discussions, and it's really, you know, a continuum of degrees of risk and degrees of concern and importance that we should focus on. It's the using criticality assessment as creating a small number of raw materials for which detailed evaluation is justified.
Thank you. I think I've got the finger from the moderator here, and that means that I should turn to the next speaker. Thank you very much, Rod. I hope you have some time to stay with us. I'm not quite sure in which time zone you are, but you are most welcome to stay on. So I would then like to turn to you, Sven. Shall we give Rod an applause? Thank you. Sven Renner, I read here that you are Program Manager, Extractives, Global Programmatic Support, Multi-Donor Trust Fund, Energy and Extractives. That's a mouthful.
Right.
What are you doing? What is this?
Okay. So it's quite straightforward. So my name is Sven. I'm at the World Bank. I'm managing the World Bank's trust fund portfolio in the mining sector. So the World Bank has two sort of big business areas, and one is the lending portfolio, where the World Bank operates based on a lending that is taken up by its client countries, and the other one is trust fund operations, and that is operations that are funded directly by donor countries. And what we do through the trust fund is quite different. It is the trust fund that finances all the innovation that the World Bank does, business development. So it's really sort of engaging in new areas. And just as an anecdote, it was the bank in 2015, I think, that for the first time came up with, let's say, the analysis that the energy transition would in fact produce such a boost of demand of mineral products. So that is a typical product of our trust-funded operations.
Excellent. Given our now means Sweden, given Sweden's importance in this area, I hope that Sweden is contributing to your funds.
Well, I wouldn't have raised that topic. No, it doesn't.
Okay, so that's something we have to work on. Thank you, Sven. That's excellent. So the focus, and Rod Eggert mentioned that there is, and also our CEO here, that there is an increasing focus on critical raw materials, whatever that is. But let me ask you, how has that affected the work of the bank?
So let me start by agreeing with Rod that the definition of critical raw materials has become more and more fuzzy. And since the bank is assisting developing countries, that definition has become even more obsolete. So a critical raw material for, let's say, the Europeans or the US might be completely uncritical for a developing country. So we use critical raw materials really on a sort of completely upside down definition, meaning it's critical for the country that we work with, and that's it. So how did sort of this acknowledgement of the new situation, be it geopolitical, be it sort of the demand that we expect to happen, and that is already visible for a couple of raw materials, how is that playing out for developing countries and for the World Bank's portfolio? So 2 years ago, we came up with a new concept which is quite straightforward, which is so that the boosted demand for minerals will create opportunities in developing countries, which is not something new. What's new is really that, let's say, the dimension of this transition. So we see that developing countries are taking or are getting a leverage that they didn't have before. There is much more a much more assertive position as to what countries want to gain out of this situation. And it is more than exporting just the concentrates. It is really connecting the mining sector. And this is not something new, but sort of this recognition of the potential is in a way is revitalized, which is connecting the mining sector to infrastructure development, meaning energy, transport, ports, skills development. It relates to trade. And in the current, let's say, geopolitical environment, and with the current dominance that we are seeing in China in the refining and the smelting stage, and the current dominance that China has on several green technologies, meaning solar PV, battery production, etc. The question is there a space to claim some sort of a share in this massively growing market? And the response is yes, but in order to do that, you need to be really, really competitive. And different aspects of competitiveness come in. Let's say the carbon footprint is one. Then competing at scale is one. So we need to talk about scale. And that means that we cannot exclude the necessity for regional cooperation. And that, again, relates to trade, regional strategic planning of infrastructure. So pieces come together, and it's quite a complex picture that we see, and that is really how we're working with developing countries. And I just came back from a mission from Malawi and Zambia, which are two countries. Well, Malawi with a non-existent mining sector at the moment, but high prospectivity. Zambia with an existing mining sector for a long, long time. How these countries can build up infrastructure, skills development, etc., in the context of the growth of the mining sector. That would be sort of an approach that we are really driving.
Thank you, Sven. I understand that we, from the Academy, we have to push for the Swedish funding of your trust fund there. But the cluster is not only government, it's also mining companies, equipment suppliers. What role do you see for Swedish companies in your activities? How active are they at present?
So I see a hugely important role, and I sort of, when I read through the reports, what I missed a bit was sort of this, let's say, looking beyond the Swedish frontiers. There is the report highlights really the importance of Sweden as a mining country for the European Union, the necessity to streamline permitting processes, etc. The importance of the Swedish industry or the providers for the mining industry. What's missing really is the potential role that Sweden could take in an engagement abroad. So if you look at the EU and if you look at the Critical Raw Materials Act, what you see is that there's a recognition that EU and EU companies must go abroad because there is I'm not quite sure, but the target is to reach 10% of the EU supply through EU production, if I'm not mistaken, by 2030. Okay, that's 10%. The rest comes from somewhere else. And EU is very, very weak in its capacity to go abroad and to secure mineral supply or secure a diversification or a sustainability in its supply through investment. There are just a few companies. So Germany has no company at all that goes abroad. It's France with Eramet, but then it's the Nordic countries. And I'm really asking myself, I mean, it is for us a complete no-brainer that there's a need for Nordic companies to go abroad because it is sort of sealing deals to secure mineral supply for Europe is not happening through handshake diplomacy, as we have been, sorry for my French, but my handshake diplomacy that we have seen, which is implemented by the EU, large delegations traveling to Zambia, to Indonesia, etc., and having nice talks with the government, because the security of supply is sealed through investment. And it is investment in the mining industry, it's investment in the refining industry, and there might be opportunities, to learn from Japan, JOGMEC, from South Korea, Comir, etc., where the government facilitates an investment abroad. And the investment can be through equity, it can be through, a company becoming an operator somewhere, but without investment, my best guess is that the problem is not going to be solved.
Thank you, Sven. I think that two very important conclusions from my part. There is a role much expanded, and I must say it's interesting to note that Finnish companies were very active abroad until 1995 or something like that, when Finnish government decided to close down the mining part of its company. And in Sweden, the tendency is now slowly expanding outside with Boliden. So thank you very much, Sven.
Thank you.
We are now diving into a major part of our reports, that's recycling and reuse. And it's such a pleasure to have you here, Deborah. I first met you a couple of years ago, and I was intrigued by your enthusiasm. So you have to show a bit of that here.
Okay.
Feel the pressure.
Okay.
But let's dive directly into this bath of recycling and reuse. And you've been part of our international group of reference group. What can we do in Sweden to facilitate reuse and recycling on a broader level? I'd go deeper into this.
Okay. Thank you very much for putting the pressure on. Really appreciate it. On a serious note, I think Sweden is in exactly the same situation as just about every other society and economy that uses any kind of high-tech equipment whatsoever, and quite a lot of low-tech equipment as well. That nothing is really designed these days to be reused through repair, remanufacture, and so forth, or to be recycled at end of life. And it's particularly true in the case of electronic products. So it's not unique to Sweden. But the biggest challenge we've got, and particularly really rapidly moving sectors like the data center industry, with which I've worked for a number of years, all the time, the focus is on performance. What can we deliver more of faster and more economically to end users? So the industry tends to focus on service delivery. There has been a push, a nod towards sustainability, but that's only in terms of operational energy efficiency. But the amount of materials that are involved in supporting and delivering the service to all of us, you know, in fact, we're using it now, obviously, streaming this event. The amount of materials involved is eye-watering. It is so massive. And it's not just what we could describe as everyday materials like iron, steel, copper, etc. But the number of critical raw materials that are involved is absolutely, and the not just the volume or mass or whatever, but their importance is absolutely unbelievable. Without them, there would be no data center industry. And there's a big sort of gap between what users, you know, people looking at kittens on their phones or TikTok videos, etc., the end user, and understanding the implications of embodied materials and so forth. That gap is so huge, it's almost insurmountable. And the people in the middle are the people who run the sector, and many of them, unfortunately, either are not really bothered, you know, the nod to sustainability, we've done it, we've made things more operationally energy efficient. The materials are another person's problem, because actually we need to make this faster and better right now. And it's the change in processing, chip processing, power, speed, etc., that is driving absolutely everything. So, yeah, we need just to sort of, it would be great to pause and think about the implications of hardware and so forth, but I don't know whether that's going to happen. But Sweden is not alone in you know, this sort of, it's not a crisis at the moment, but it might become a crisis.
I think it will be very difficult to refer back to President Trump. I mean, that's sustainability is out the window, as I understand it. But why is the computer in the IT industry so uninterested in sustainability issues then?
Well, it's mainly because it's driven by performance, you know, and the change in delivery of service. And it's actually, in some respects, it's easier not to think about it. Without wanting to upset too many people, original equipment manufacturers are driven by the desire to sell equipment. They don't bother, they're not interested really in what happens to stuff either in midlife or end of life. So designers are employed to create new equipment, and it's pushed all the time. And there's a sort of ethos of actually, when you know, a bicycle, a moped, or a Fiat Cinquecento electric would do the job that you want, but they're pushing Ferraris, you know, big gas-guzzling cars, or it's that sort of analogy. So there's a big challenge about the sort of perception of performance of products as well. And I think that happens, okay, in industry, sort of high-tech industry, but it also happens further down the line with consumer products. We're continually encouraged to buy new stuff, you know, to have bigger hair, bigger whatever. So there's very little consideration of any other business model than the one on which the there's been really dominant since the Industrial Revolution, taking, making, using, and disposing. And apart from few industries like Rolls-Royce, who sell power by the hour, so they own their engines and they lease them, you know, to the companies that use them. That's probably the most inventive and lateral business model I can think of. But, you know, we need a shift in business thinking to be able to control resources. And if you decide that you want to recycle, then you know exactly what you've got in your products, and you can take control of the resources as they're returned to you.
Well, I think we cannot change the sort of operation of the market economy directly, at least. But what can we do? You've been working with how to facilitate recycling, and you also spoken at earlier meetings about circular business models.
Yeah.
Could you develop that a bit further?
Yeah. Well, so if we think about it, reuse or product life extension, encouraging companies to design products or to employ designers to design products that can be upgraded, etc. That's one really key thing. But there's a user aspect involved with that, is how on earth do we overcome some of the behavioural barriers associated with reuse? We need to build confidence in reuse and to encourage governments to use or allow warranties and guarantees and so forth to be allocated to second life products. That's one thing. So there's a big design element there. We also need to design things that can be recycled properly and easily and efficiently and economically and so forth. So at the minute, what we're doing in terms of reuse and recycling, all the strategies that we are developing tend to be reactive. We've created a mess. How on earth can we begin to get ourselves out of it? What we need is to be much, much more proactive and to think about designing products that are fit for a circular economy, and they can be reused and remanufactured, and at full end of life, they can be easily disassembled and recycled. But that only goes, well, it's only possible up to a certain extent. And should I talk about the products that we did?
Yeah, okay. You can, but before that.
Okay.
So how do what are the demands that the Academy could put forward today to at least take a little step on this long road?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's sticks and carrots, isn't it? There is a behavioural element. How do we educate the public to want to buy second life products? That's a big challenge. There is trust in some things, and I noticed, this is my first visit to Sweden, and I'm impressed with your advertising on TV, that Vinted, the second-hand market, is being, advertised nationally on TV. That's quite interesting shift. But how do we encourage people to trust products? We wouldn't think twice about buying an old house, which may be not second, but third, fourth, fifth, 10th hand. We're happy to do that. But in terms of things like electronics and so forth, there's anxiety around data security and also, performance as well. But that comes back to the Fiat, Cinquecento and Ferrari argument a little bit. So I don't know, maybe the Swedish Academy needs to look at carrots, incentives to encourage reuse and so forth, and also maybe push the government to introduce schemes to support that. But also, there's a huge problem globally with collection of items for recycling. At the moment, e-waste, and the biggest challenge is with consumer goods rather than goods used by industry, where there are much more stringent policies and legislation for collection of e-waste. But for consumer goods, how on earth can we encourage return of consumer goods to facilitate or increase the volume of stuff that can be recycled? So I think the Academy really needs to push the government to develop sticks and carrots, reward and penalties, not a nice word, but...
For tins with drinks, we have a krona. You have to pay a krona, and then you can get it back. But you have a couple of slides. Those will be available to everybody afterwards.
Okay,
so
that's fine.
Thank you very much, Deborah, and thank you the entire first group of speakers.
And thank you, Magnus. Please stay on. I have some final questions for you. I promised very simple questions. So what I heard now is that we need more bilateral collaboration. and to think about our role outside of Europe and new business model, new behavior, new design, basically. So I will ask, maybe it's a big question. So you discussed the critical raw materials concept, or so are we over that? Or can we still use that? Is there a value? It's a question for both of you, both connected to recycling and from you. Very short.
Okay.
Maybe yes or no, if you can. But maybe that's too hard.
I think it might be valid, depending on your perspective.
Yeah.
But I think we shouldn't sort of get ourselves into that rabbit hole discussing what is now critical, what not.
Exactly.
Because the issues that we need to deal with are completely different dimension. And it relates mostly to strategic thinking. I mean, bringing back strategic thinking and implementing strategic thinking in securing raw materials, that is, I think, the issue.
And Deborah?
I would just reiterate what I was saying before about drivers, to encourage collection of e-waste, to develop recycling infrastructure and so forth, I think are really important. But it's, yeah.
So still something we should continue with then,
I think so.
Still working.
Yeah.
Rod, online. I don't know if you heard my questions. It's connected to the concept.
Yeah.
Critical raw materials.
Yes, I did. I think the concept is still relevant, but only if we recognize that what is critical depends critically on the circumstance, that what's critical to a company will not be critical necessarily to a country, will not be critical necessarily from the perspective as the world as a whole. And so I think an EU list that includes 50-some materials, or a US list that includes 50-some materials, in that way of that sort of framing, it really is not very helpful, except to shine a spotlight on the general issue.
Okay. So thank you to all of you very much. So these are. Before, I think we heard some things connected to like our role outside of Europe, and I just want to check who's here in the audience. Do we have any investors with us here today? Yeah, well, one. That was some politicians. Ah, okay. I hope you're online with us then and listening to all this. So now it's time for our next theme, permit processes and cooperation. And I would like to invite Catherine Gosselin. Please, welcome. And Ian Dover, who I think is with us online. I hope. Or no, sorry, maybe Ian is in the audience or today?
No.
He's online. And Dr. Anna Elisabeth Bastida is also with us online. Welcome. And I leave the floor again to Magnus.
Thank you. I hope you're not already getting tired of me. I thought I'd start off with Elisabeth Bastida. And good to see you here. You were supposed to come, and you have really missed a very interesting session so far, and not speaking about the drinks afterwards, but we will save that for you for a later occasion. Elisabeth, you are from Argentina, and I understand you spend half a year in Argentina, and the other half you go to the sunny Scotland. And you teach at the Center for Energy and Mineral Law and Policy. It's not a very well-known center, CEPMLP, but it's actually the leading, by far the leading university training lawyers and legal people in minerals and energy politics and also policy. So if you want to join that area, you should go to Dundee in Scotland. But I know, Elizabeth, that you follow the trends in legislation around the world, and I'd like you to develop what you see as trends in mineral legislation globally today. I mean, we are, I hope, in the process, perhaps in the next 5 years, to revitalize our Swedish legislation. It would be useful to have some input from around the world.
Thank you so much, Magnus, for the invitation. I would have loved to join you in person. So in terms of trends, there is so much going on. And I would, so probably for someone, as I am sure many in the room have worked in the sector for a long time. So we haven't seen this dynamic landscape in terms of regulations and initiatives in the sector. So in terms, I would say first, I would just summarize a couple of trends. And the first one is on permitting. I think that there is, we see the emphasis on regulatory quality, on the quality of permitting, and on one hand, and the interest on accelerating and fast-tracking permits to access mineral rights. And so I see that there are the trend in streamlining permits. So it is a common feature, I would say, of trends around the world for different reasons. Yes, so from the point of view of the market and access to or security or access to minerals in terms of fast tracking, and from the point of view of resource producing countries, in many cases is in terms of regulatory quality, in terms of streamlining processes, ensuring the interest or participation from local communities, and improving environmental permitting. I think it's a complex issue. It's not because usually the legislation is quite fragmented, and so it is a question of bringing together different universe, a constellation, I would say, of titles, environmental permits, and different types of contracts and social practices. So permitting, I would say, it is a number one aspect of trends in the sector. And of course, another point is it is a requirement or interest for local processing, downstream processing, and it is in line with the trends that we see in terms of improving benefits or local value addition, and downstream processing and value add, and in many cases it is in line with industrial policy actions and interest from resource-rich producing countries. So I will leave it to both of them. I could give some examples as well. So I think that related to these two questions, we see in some countries an interest in improving information that information, environmental, social, technical, economic information to take better decisions. I would say from the point of view of resource-rich countries, I think that and yes, so I will leave it there. So I don't want to take all the time, but I will leave it to these three.
No worries. But to me, there is a contradiction here between streamlining processes and adding local value, trying to obtain local consent, if you like. How do countries deal with that?
I agree with you. It is this different different sets of trends that come from different interests as well. I think there is a great role for innovation, and there is a great room for innovation. So bringing better processes that integrate the interest of local communities and improve environmental outcomes and provide better information, that all that takes time. So I think that is the type of issues that actually I always emphasize when we see these trends on fast-tracking permits, and the need for social license to operate and the legitimacy of projects. All that takes time, so we need more information. There is a need of better processes for consultation. So how I think that there is I would say that, and all that in terms of the legal frameworks and legal environment, legal constitutional environments of each country. So that are, but definitely I would say all these different sets of trends take place in terms of what we term as the permitting processes.
Right. Deborah, earlier we were talking about sticks and carrots to bring some changes in the recycling processes. Are any countries thinking about some carrots here in order to deal with these things, or is it mostly sticks, you know?
I think that I would say probably Deborah can intervene here, but I would say that it is what I see what I have seen is mainly in terms of sticks. I think there are some innovative initiatives. So I think that an interesting initiative it is the that brings the 2 points that you have asked me together. Probably it is the national lithium strategy designed by Chile that actually intends to increase knowledge of the salt lakes from which brine is extracted, and so to have better better knowledge of the hydrogeological models of the salt lakes, so to improve information on the ecosystems in order to have better information for taking decisions in the contracts, in the contract negotiation, for example, and also to include biodiversity requirements, the commitments with local communities around them. And so all types of innovations around better information, better knowledge of ecosystems and of the geological knowledge of them. So I think that is the type of, I would say that type of innovations we start to see in that way.
So is that it costs to obtain that increased knowledge?
Yes.
Is that then paid by government and made available to potential contractors, or how does it work?
Well, it is still early days. I think that it is still early days because it is a new strategy. But that is the type, I would say, this interest in improving the environmental footprint of projects, for example, and that relates to the interest on research, on catalyzing, having or bringing more investment in research, development, and this could be these are the type of I think of spaces in which there is room for more collaboration, for investment, for collaboration, for looking for solutions, and so that is definitely an interesting, I think, area of possible research and development.
A final question here, with a brief answer, I hope. We have talked about the strength of the Swedish mining cluster, but no doubt the major investments in mining are to a large extent in Latin America. So I think it's time that we perhaps change this perspective a little, that it's not only Swedish knowledge that could be exported or whatever you like, but there is also room for a cooperation. How should Sweden try to approach countries like Chile and Argentina? Is there bilateral agreements we should make, or what is your advice, Elizabeth?
All right, thank you. I think that is a very interesting scope, very interesting scope for partnership, for collaboration, for constructive investment, trade, and there are important instruments, as we know, the strategic partnerships according to the EU Critical Raw Materials Act, the new generation of trade agreements. But I think there is definitely a scope for not only investment, but also, as I said before, I emphasize again, initiatives in terms of research, innovation, and development for better extraction processes, processes that minimize the environmental and climate footprint of projects. I think that is a scope for collaboration, because there is knowledge in two ways. There is knowledge to share, and there are ecosystems of research, development, and innovation that and common projects that could catalyze this type of projects and collaboration.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I will give you a hand here from the distance. So we are now switching focus from west to east. Our next speaker is our Australian representative in that international reference group, at present in Cambodia. Ian, is that so?
Yeah, that's correct. Thanks, Magnus.
Well, it's great. What time is it there? I suppose it's getting towards evening.
Yes, it's 9 p.m. here, and I've been here for about a week. So I'm getting used to the time zone here, even though it's only 3 hours different from Australia, from Brisbane anyway.
Right, great, Ian. I see similarities between Australia and Sweden, the Nordic countries, in that we are suppliers of minerals and metals, like Australia. We are not buyers, or not mainly buyers like Germany or France or Britain. And so I'd like to have a comment for you on how Australia tries to develop its policies to make the most of this business opportunity that the increasing demand offers to mineral-rich countries.
Yeah, thanks, Magnus, and also thanks to the IBA for this opportunity. Australia has, over the last 40 years, actually stored more of the stream process. And so what that's meant is that there is much more of an emphasis on developing efficiencies in the extraction of our various metals, various ores and metals. At the moment, the Australian government strategies, I guess, are to go beyond what we have done for the last 30 years, which is basically digging up ores and some giving them mining overseas to the likes of Japan and Korea and now to China. But I think that we also know that in relation to the more boutique critical minerals, many countries have approached Australia looking for us to develop our value chains to a greater extent, particularly with some greater downstream processing. I think the problem that we have with this is that the, if you like, the aspiration and the needs are outpacing the reality for investment and also for our metallurgical capabilities. And we're looking for, there's a need and we're looking for greater collaboration and investment from those customers in countries such as Japan and Korea, the UK, the European Union, and the US. I think particularly in the Western world, we're limited by capabilities at the moment. It's far easier to extract the materials than it is to process them. And that's a particular problem, I think, within the Western economies. And it's something which Australia, as well as I know Sweden, is looking to address and will need to address over the next decade or two. Right. So if we assume that Sweden and its cluster... I think the other area... Please go ahead, Ian. Sorry, I was just going to say that the other area where Australia is investing particularly is in improving its prospectivity. And that occurs at a federal level with Geoscience Australia and also at the state geological surveys level, because in fact the mining economy is generally dictated by the states rather than the federal government in Australia. And a lot of money is going into improving our prospectivity so that explorers and miners will have a better chance, a lower risk chance, if you like, of succeeding in the development of new ore bodies and also in the processing of waste, mine waste, that is. Thank you. So you see two major areas here. One is the really metallurgical developments and downstream opportunities, as well as increasing exploration and focusing on that one. So if we start with the first line of developments that you see, the processing and further processing, and not only digging and exporting. So if we try to link back to our situation here in Sweden, are there opportunities for cooperation which might not have been taken into account or materialized so far? I think absolutely, yes, there is. You mentioned at the beginning that there is a similarity between Sweden and Australia, both as mining countries, but also we have, both Sweden and Australia have two of the most highly advanced sectors in mining equipment, technology and services in the world. And we are seeing in Australia, and we've seen this for the past decade, that it is sometimes easier because the investments are lower to actually collaborate along the lines of supply of the mining equipment, technology and services suppliers into the mining industry than it is to collaborate, if you like, at the mining level and in the development of new ore bodies. We also have existing relationships that have been going along now for 20 to 30 years in metallurgical research, and we have university research and other groups in Australia with relationships with the likes of Glencore, Aurubis, Umicore, Boliden, Nyrstar, as well as Rio and BHP. And I think that is where the opportunities really exist because we can use that also to develop in a digital sense, using digital twin techniques, we can develop the value chains before we actually have to invest huge amounts of money in actually setting them up. So these can be optimized. This has been done in the automotive industry. It's been done in the pharmaceuticals industry. I think Sweden and Australia have a big opportunity to do this together in relation to mining and the downstream processing of minerals.
Excellent. I'd like to turn in my final question really to the exploration. The Academy has proposed that exploration should be considered an innovation in itself, so that the same regulations should be applied and the same support be applied to exploration projects as to technological developments, innovation in other areas. And we think that would facilitate exploration and work. What's your take on that?
Well, I think, yes, absolutely, because it's something that we've been doing in Australia for some time. The issues of exploration, as I said, the federal government has just signed up for another 3-year program at around $3.5 billion to increase the prospectivity in Australia of a whole range of minerals, not only in terms of new mines, but interestingly enough, in the reprocessing of waste. And it's this, while Australia is not large enough in itself to innovate in relation to a lot of recycling, we do have a lot of mine waste, which can be innovatively processed. And what's there from a characterisation viewpoint is something which is a big part of innovation in exploration and prospectivity in Australia.
Thank you very much, Ian. We will have to go on, but please stay on with us. Our main moderator always has some questions. So thank you very much. Catherine, it's great to see you here. Catherine is a language wonder. She's been here for a year or two, and she denies that she speaks Swedish very excellently, but we have agreed that we shall speak English,
yeah,
so that I will manage. So I think it's interesting. Both Australia and Canada have these similarities with Sweden in that we are a mining country, a mineral supplying country, if you like. And I'd like to have some ideas from you, Catherine, about what is happening in Canada. What is the general thrust of Canadian federal and state provinces to catch the opportunities that these new times bring?
Yeah, thanks, Magnus, and nice to see everyone here in person as well. I mean, I think just looking at the report from the Royal Academy here in Sweden, I would say that Canada went through a very similar process just a few years ago. So in that sense, I think you're very well positioned. Although Canada has long been an important mining nation, I would say it wasn't really until a few years ago that the topic of mining caught the attention of political decision makers as global conversations around critical minerals really came about, and I'm sure we're on the minds of governments here in Sweden, the EU, of course, as well. But luckily, there had been some groundwork laid just a few years before all of this kind of global excitement around critical minerals. At the federal level, kind of quietly, the Canadian federal government department responsible for natural resource development had been developing what they called the Canadian Minerals and Metals Plan, which was published in 2019. So that was a major process. They undertook a lot of research, engagement with stakeholders across the country, and really served as a visioning exercise, I think, in similar ways to your own report, and understanding the state of the mining industry in Canada, where do they want it to be in 10, 30, 50 years, and what are the steps to get there. So when I think suddenly in maybe 2019, this issue of critical minerals really came into focus for political decision makers in the Canadian government, they were really well prepared with that kind of baseline information to pivot to developing a Canadian critical minerals strategy and to come up with policy recommendations that really cover, all sorts of areas, investments in infrastructure, looking across the supply chain from extraction through to recycling, looking at research and development. It's a very comprehensive strategy that I won't get into here. I know that you reviewed it as part of the development of the Swedish report as well. But I think, what this led to was really unprecedented government support at both federal and provincial levels in Canada for the mining industry. The last few federal budgets have, involved billions of dollars in support of this critical minerals strategy. And, of course, it's now kind of early to say what the outcomes of that will be because this has only been the past couple of years. But I think, just having such a robust baseline information and strategy in place really then facilitated the government feeling like they had a direction they could move and multiple areas in which they could invest or look at regulatory reform and that sort of thing. So I think in that sense, you guys are really on the right track. It seems like you're following in that same approach.
And again, a question I've asked all the other panelists here, and I'd like to ask you as well, is then how could this experience and the work in Canada, how could Swedish cluster here benefit from that? Are there any bilateral links as you're aware of, or how could we approach and get access to all that experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think even within the last month, it feels like this question of bilateral collaboration between Canada and Sweden or Canada and the EU has changed from a sort of nice to have, like, let's think of some opportunities to collaborate, to something that's really imperative for both of us. And I think, two areas that sort of come to mind, and I think reading the EVA reports as well, I know there was a line in there kind of talking about how the EU will, as mentioned earlier today, will never be self-sufficient in its minerals and metals, and therefore relies on a well-functioning global trade system. And I think we, suddenly within the last month feel like we're not in that context anymore. So it feels, quite critical that we think about new ways in which we might collaborate. And I think, two areas that come to mind. One is around investment. I think in Canada that is still an area we've really struggled with. Of course, there are now more government investments across the mining value chain, but even well before these conversations around critical minerals came about, we'd kind of seen a shift from patient capital that traditionally supported the mining industry in Canada. That capital went away to quicker returns like cannabis and Bitcoin, and it never really returned to the industry. So there is what I understand to be quite a gap in terms of attracting that investment. I would assume there's also challenges in attracting investment here in Sweden, and maybe that's something we can discuss more if there's more opportunities to collaborate in bilateral investment. And I think the other idea, which one of the earlier panelists, I forget who was discussing just around the supply chain, I think there's possibly opportunities there as well for us to look maybe away from some traditional markets for our raw materials, look at whether there might be really clear opportunities for Canadian raw materials to support Swedish manufacturing or vice versa, and how do we have those specific conversations and support both, I guess, diversification of our respective supply chains and also building potentially new supply chains in different areas.
I think it's interesting that Canadian iron ore is now going to be exported to Sweden, as I understand, to produce carbon dioxide-free steel. Let's see what happens with that. But I think Stegra has made some precautions at least. But let me turn a bit to your home or turf, so to say, towards sustainable mining program that you manage for Mining Association of Canada. Is that's the right order of the words? Yes. So you have done a lot of work in this area in Canada, and you personally also. And this has been an issue with the indigenous people for a very long time in Canada, like it is in Sweden. You've been here in Sweden for a couple of years. I'm not sure how much you have managed to catch of the Swedish situation, but what could we learn from your experiences in Canada and perhaps your program as well?
Yeah, so I think, maybe speaking to the Towards Sustainable Mining program first, or TSM, I'll refer to it as, it's been really valuable for the Canadian mining industry and its stakeholders over the past 20 years that it's existed, and I think I can say the same for our partner associations around the world, over a dozen national mining associations, including in Australia, are requiring their mining company members to implement the standard as well. So really significant in terms of global application of the program, including in our neighboring countries. And in Finland and Norway here, both of their national associations are implementing TSM. I was just in Norway a couple of weeks ago, actually, for their launch of their first public reporting of mine site level sustainability results in accordance with the TSM standards. I think, two things that TSM has maybe offered companies. One is just around providing sort of a benchmark for them to assess sustainability performance against. So, if they're starting out on their sustainability journey, TSM is giving them a clear roadmap to take steps towards eventually operating in accordance with good practice. But of course, in Sweden, there are many mining companies that already do have really robust management systems for sustainability, but TSM is still allowing them that opportunity to benchmark where they are with the rest of the industry, identify possible gaps. And I think just on the indigenous question, briefly, obviously Sweden has quite a in some ways a different context than Canada, but I think the approach we've taken through TSM and generally in Canada to Indigenous engagement and collaboration could be really valuable as an area for more collaboration between Canada and Sweden as well. I think going beyond just consulting with Indigenous communities, but in TSM, what we're asking companies to do is really build long-term, ongoing, meaningful engagement across the mine life cycle with Indigenous communities, and with a view to collaborating and co-decision making around social and environmental and economic issues of interest to those communities. And I think we have a lot of really good examples to be shared, both from companies and from communities, that could form, an interesting basis for dialogue in the future. So.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And thank you to Elizabeth Bastida and to Ian in Cambodia. Please stay on. We might have some more questions from Charlotte now.
Yeah, just you can please stay, Magnus, as well, I think.
Okay. I'm not going to answer any questions.
Okay, good. Just to summarize, it was mentioned a bit that we have room for innovation, was said by our first speaker. And we also talked a bit about focus on processing. That's what you talked about a bit. And then, of course, new supply chains was mentioned. So now I come with all the tricky questions here. If I happen to have a lot of money for innovation, could you give me some ideas where I should spend it? Maybe we can start with Anna Elisabeth Bastida, if you're still with us, or...
Start with Ian.
Then we start with Ian. Anna Elisabeth is still here. Please.
Yes, thank you. So I would start as I look mostly at the regulatory issues, and I am so aware of the need for innovation in the environmental footprint and in terms that and to incentivize better extraction processes, innovation at that stage, and innovation in of course, we need innovations in terms of the legal regimes as well. So to support and provide incentives for that. I think that environmental quality and better extraction processes, innovation around that area is crucial, I think, in terms of social acceptance of projects as well.
Thank you, thank you. We'll take that with us. I think Ian and Dover, if you have any comment on that as well. Anything you think we should spend our money on innovation, what should we do? Maybe now it was too difficult for Cambodia. Now, I will leave the word to you, Catherine, if you have something you think we should do.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just, I of course agree with Anna-Elisabeth's comments. I think maybe thinking back to some of my own comments, considering how we might invest in maybe like innovative or new financing mechanisms, collaborative forms of financing or business models, it seems, given challenges with the current investment environment, that there is a need to come up with new models for securing production of critical minerals across the supply chain. And probably that needs some investment itself to explore what that might look like in new and effective ways. But once we have those ideas as well, maybe funneling some finances towards them to try out those new models of investment and operation.
Thank you very much. Ian, do you have something you want to add? Some few words to us.
Yes, I do, in few words. I think if we're looking at the supply of critical materials, not minerals, but the materials, then we must invest in the innovation associated with producing the downstream processing at much lower costs and much greater environmental outcomes than we currently do. So that's where the investment is needed in order to be able to deliver critical materials into manufacturing in Europe or anywhere else.
Thank you very much, and a big applause to all of you. Thank you. We're soon moving on, but before there were no politicians here, and almost there was only one investor, so I hope, are all of you from mining companies then? I know they are here. Not from mining companies either. There are some are here from mining companies. This will be interesting. I will chat with you later to just hear where you all are coming from during the break. Now it's time for, the next part, the final part. We're moving closer to home. Nordic cooperation, the European Union and the industry. So please welcome Riikka Aaltonen. And Pertti Lamberg, please. And with us online, we have Maria Nyberg also. Welcome.
Hello.
And I leave the word again to Magnus.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start discussion with you, Riikka.
Okay.
I hope you're prepared for that.
We'll see.
Okay. Riikka has a long background in national and also regional government in Finland and also in industry. And present, she's a professional board member of mining or exploration companies. I know that Finland is now introducing a new legislation. Can you just give us a brief of what is happening, what is new in the Finnish legislation?
Well, a lot is happening. Actually, there is, when considering the timescale for mining, 25 years is the quarter. So that's why there are recent changes in Mining Act, only 1.5 years ago. So very recent, so to speak, seeing how they work in practice is on way. So there will be an evaluation quite rather soon. We have a mining tax, which was introduced 1 year ago, and it will be paid afterwards for the production of a previous year. So this year now, next month, is the first time to pay that. And then there is an ongoing quite extensive changes in environmental, not so much in regulation when it comes to permitting, but the authority system will be completely renewed. So we have had regional authorities for permitting and also regional authorities for supervision. And now there will be one national authority for the lot. So basically the same, but of course in practice very different.
Right. So I know it's early days, as you said here several times, but do you think there is something which we should take, or we should also try to introduce in Sweden? I know there are processes to have a more central treatment of these permits, but any indications of how this has worked in Finland? Has the industry, are they up in arms, or they like it?
No, the industry, well, we'll see what Pertti says, but basically the industry, of course, welcomes the national authority, because the idea is that the processes will be more similar, because now when there has been regional authorities, it means that there has been some changes. So companies who are operating in different parts of the country have actually noticed that. And of course, hopefully it means that specialist resources can better be provided to all the permitting. So we hope, of course, that it will mean smoother permitting, and we'll see whether that is then realized. But hopefully streamlining the lot.
You and I, we have met several times in Brussels and discussed how could the Nordic countries improve the influence in Brussels. Sweden and Finland are two small countries, but really in terms of metals and minerals dominating in Europe, I would say, or at least at the mining stage there. And I know that you have been also active in the Nordic Council. Is that what you call it?
Nordic Council of Ministers.
Yeah. So what can be done to tighten the cooperation between Sweden and Finland? In the Academy's report, that's one of our key message, that small countries, the two, should cooperate.
Well, we were discussing with Pertti, and I suggested that there should be done a desktop practice on considering the exploration and mining that is currently in where the focus is in northern Finland as well as northern Sweden, partly even in northern Norway. There would be a desktop survey on how would it be treated if it was within one country as a mining district, which actually is if we were in Canada or Australia. Now there happens to be some borders, but how would that be dealt? And maybe is there something that could be done even if they are in different countries? But that could be interesting just to look at that if it was one district in one country.
I like this. Some hard, concrete, or at least, ideas and thinking. Excellent there.
Because we know that working across the borders is then relatively easy when it comes to the Nordics. So sure. Maybe there is some kind of low-hanging fruits to pick. You never know. Well,
the geology is definitely the same. So
exactly.
It is the national borders is a bit, in that sense, not very creative, so to say. And what about the Nordic Council of Ministers? Is that they have done, for your benefit here, they've done a couple of projects and they've taken views in the Mining and Exploration Center. Is that continuing, or what should we propose that to push for that?
Absolutely, because there is constant financing, and the grounds for good cooperation is if you have financing. So I think that would provide an excellent platform for continued collaboration instead of having it project by project, but there would be some continuity, and also that there would be collaboration and maybe annual or whatever meetings on a like political level, policy level, but also on the authority level, just to exchange experiences and do's and don'ts and discussing issues, because we have so much similarities when it comes to geology, environment, and of course the regulation.
Well, I think it's also interesting to consider that Greenland is also plays a part in the Nordic Council of Ministers.
Exactly.
Although they don't share the geology, it might be a good idea to include them as well to
yeah, so
save
I think we should use that platform better. And not to forget that there is financing to be fetched.
Okay, well, that's excellent. We've spoken about bilateral agreements and so on, and in this sense, Finland is a bit more active abroad. The Finnish Geological Survey has been working in Africa and Latin America and also Central Asia for many years. And how important do you think that is to build relations? And has it been possible to catch on to that work that the survey has done, which has been limited, but still given Finnish companies an access to various parts of the world?
Absolutely, and also this long-term work has given opportunities, because some of those persons who have had connection to Geological Survey of Finland during their early years are now sitting on very influential positions in countries. And of course, it is much easier to kind of continue collaboration as they know Geological Survey from maybe 20, 30 years ago. So it has been an excellent kind of door opener to then Finnish even small and medium-sized companies, and of course also the bigger technology companies. But of course we are always keen on getting more of those, so we have to kind of provide for the small and medium ones.
Right. Well, I think that's for now my questions to you, Riikka. Thank you very much.
May I?
Oh yes, of course.
I just want to mention two things that
the floor is yours.
I didn't see in the report.
Oh, good.
One is that we have Mining Finland. From the beginning, government financed a 3-year project to enhance export for the small and medium-sized companies. The start was very good, so the companies created a private organization, and they have been continuing, and they have increased their membership a lot, and it has become a very known brand to be participating in various events and also on the ministerial export trips and so forth. So that type of activity opens doors for the new comers also when it comes to consultants and service providers and so forth. So that could be a good one. And then there is no mentioning of stakeholder forum. We have had, in Finland there was created a network for sustainable mining, and that organization in turn started the TSM system in Finland. Then, well, things happened, but now there is a new fresh start, so that could be something to consider.
Oh, that's interesting. So Finnish companies think TSM is something which they should work.
Yes, they are working on that and reporting according to that. And the positive thing is that there is kind of similar type of report from different companies. So for the public, it's easier to maybe to read than all companies reporting on their own ways. So absolutely, it is giving good information for the public.
Thank you, Rika. You're always reliable to come up with some good ideas. So let's turn towards Brussels. And we have Maria Nyberg here, working with the Commission in minerals and metals for a couple of years. Most welcome, Maria. It's a pity you can't come to Stockholm.
Hey, Magnus. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Can you hear me well?
We hear you loud and clear. Excellent. So I think we should shoot off directly, Maria. When we started the project 2 years ago, it actually coincided with the first launch of the CRMA. Could you just give us a brief update on what has happened and what is now the progress of the CRMA?
Happy to do that. Yes, and I actually think it was so that just some days after the Commission proposed the Critical Raw Materials Act in March 2023, our former head of unit attended one of your events in that time to present the Critical Raw Materials Act, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Yes. So after that, the Act entered into force 23rd of May last year after a record fast time of a record fast decision process between the co-legislators. And the Critical Raw Materials Board met for the first time on the date of the entry into force of the Act. That was also the day when we launched the first call for strategic projects, which the first cut-off date was in August of last year, and we were very happy to receive 170 project promoters coming forward to request the strategic project label for the projects, and they cover all the strategic raw materials, all the 17, and all stages, extraction, processing, recycling, and where possible substitution of the critical raw materials chain. So right now, we are preparing the assessment of these strategic project applications with the help of external experts. And the Commission will come forward, it is estimated, in Q1 with a list of strategic projects that have been adopted. So that is for the strategic projects, but that is not all that we are doing, all that we have been doing. We have also been working with member states to support the work for the national exploration programs, to address the lack of price transparency and market volatility that characterizes the CRM market. We are working on a platform for aggregating demand and supply of strategic raw materials. This work is ongoing. It takes a lot of inspiration from the platform for gas that has been established earlier. The criticality exercise that we are doing since 2011, it now has a little different approach because now it is set into, it is included in the regulatory provisions of the Critical Raw Materials Act, and we are working with the member state authorities for a more regular monitoring system. As concerns the 4 articles that relate to higher circularity of critical raw materials, we are right now involved in building evidence-based knowledge to support the secondary legislation, the additional legislation that sets out the specific details for the respective circularity provisions. So that relates to coming forward with a list of products, components, and waste streams rich in CRM to facilitate the preparation of the national circularity programs that member states will come forward with. This list will come in Q2 of this year, and member states will come forward with their national circularity programs in 2 years' time. As regards the two product-related articles on permanent magnets, we will come forward towards the end of this year with legislation with precising the labeling format for the permanent magnets, and then next year with the recycled content calculation and verification rules. And we have also the article on environmental footprint, where we will first look into which would be the priority CRM for which there would be a need to carry out an environmental footprint, and then the kind of proportionality assessment. And finally, as concerns the recognition of certification schemes, we will come forward at a later stage with a template to allow for that. Just let me say, Magnus, you talked about Greenland. We have a strategic partnership on strategic raw materials partnership in place with Greenland since 2023. And that is work that is really picking up in intensity. And in a couple of weeks' time, we will be together with Greenland at PDAC on supporting the development of strategic raw materials projects in Greenland that would be of benefit for our economy.
Oh, that's great. I think that's a good idea from the Commission to support Greenland. We have a room for another question to you, Maria. Here in Sweden has been discussed, how shall the Commission influence the permitting periods to shorten that when that is under national legislations?
Yes. Happy to do that, and I actually also prepared some slides. I will not use them now, but feel free to share them with participants if that can be helpful. So as regards permitting, we do have provisions relating to that in the Act, and that is relevant both for the critical raw materials projects more generally, where it is so that member states will need to introduce a single point of contact that will coordinate the submission of relevant information and provide a comprehensive decision to within a specific time limit to the project promoters. So that goes for all critical raw materials projects. And then for the strategic projects, one of the benefits that they will have is that we have more far-reaching provisions for these projects in terms of more streamlined and predictable permitting. So we have timelines, 27 months for extraction and 15 months for processing and recycling projects. We have a priority status, and we have also the some additional requirements. So details on that is included, but we do have that covered in the Raw Materials Act.
Okay, that's great, Maria. Thank you very much. Please hang in there if there will be some further questions. So let me start or turn now to Pertti Lamberg. Most welcome, Pertti. I think it's great that one of the most important mining companies in the world, Anglo-American, sends their representative to us here. You're most welcome. Let's start directly, Pertti. Anglo has continued working in Finland 15 years or something like that, and it's actually one of the flagship projects in the entire group of companies of Anglo, and it takes a lot of time. What makes it so important to Anglo? Why are you still here?
Simple answer is it's a geology. So when we in Anglo looked where we should explore nickel and copper. Finland was chosen, and in the region, in the central Lapland, it was we were mapping 100 targets and numbered them from 1 to 100. And we started the work. First one, nothing. Second one, nothing. Number 8, bang. And on average, you say that you need 1,000 sort of targets to hit one. So the odds were on our side. It's not always as lucky in Finland. But after us, also the discovery of gold, Signature gold deposit in Finland has been made. So there's lots of prospectivity in Finland. Adding on that the legislation is good, transparent. It's a high technology country like Finland and Sweden, and not infrastructure is very close. So in Finland, the forest industry has made that there's roads everywhere. There's a power line you can see almost every place, excluding maybe the most North Lapland. So these reasons we ended up to Finland, and we are not giving up.
I'm glad to hear that. I hope you will find something on the Swedish side of the border as well. But Pertti, you mentioned earlier, we discussed this many times, that there was also an element that you thought that Anglo wanted to prove that a mine could be started with the very best operations and so on, and according to the high standards of the Nordics.
Yeah, the ore body which we discovered is Sakatti, which locates underneath a protected mire. It's a Natura 2000 network. And of course, when it was discovered, an assessment was made that can we make a mine in there? And the outcome was that yes, but we need to make it something special. What we have done, we have mitigated the impacts which are coming into the protected area. It's going to be 5 kilometers long tunnel coming, and there's no above ground structures in the protected area. And we do sort of a similar in Anglo in UK. There's a project of Woodsmith, which has a 42 kilometer long tunnel from the mine, which is more than 1 kilometer underneath, going to the port. And that's another sign that with the technology and determination, you can do in sensitive areas, and that's also a protected area in Woodsmith. And that's sort of one part of Anglo's vision, is that we are the company who can make mines in a sensitive environment with the minimal impact and also with the positive local impact. Adding also that in Finland we purchased 3,000 hectares of intact forest landscape in north, and we have started the compensation. That's the biggest private protected area. 10 million we put just before we know that do we get permits to compensate our impacts for mining. Who does that?
Anglo, obviously. but tell me, you see the geology of the Nordics to be the main driving forces. Certainly there are very interesting, geologically interesting areas around the world. So, and you mentioned legislation. Are there any deterrents that you have had to fight with?
Deterrence, so sorry.
Why, which were you had to tell your colleagues in Anglo that proposed something in Bolivia, and you come with this, Sakatti, what?
Yeah, sure. We are competing with other projects in the world. So every year the budget discussions goes that why the money should be coming to our project, why not to some other projects, and biggest issue within this sort of discussion is that long permitting time which we have. Without being in a protected area, we easily have in Finland 10 years, as in Sweden. So and in past it was sort of maybe say granted in Finland that you finally get the permits, but we had a couple of decisions in 2 years back or 5 years, the recent 5 years, that one pulp mill didn't receive at all the environmental permit. And the BASF, the nickel sulfate production facility hasn't started yet in Harjavalta. Okay. So that has, of course, caused a big reputational issue, and that explaining why this has happened, and then trying to make things that our project, that we would be finally getting the permits in time. So that has been let's say, the biggest challenge regarding my project, or our project.
Excellent. Riikka, she proposed more intensive cooperation on all levels, and you have, like Riikka, you have one foot in Sweden and one in Finland. You've been in the university in Luleå for many years. So how will is that possible?
Yeah, actually the companies work already. So there's Boliden is both countries, Anglo-American, Agnico Eagle is in both countries, and there are lots of junior companies. So I don't see any like the companies are already there. I was excited Riikka's idea and elaborate that a bit, so that why don't we look also the permitting landscape? Why don't we take this northern territory of Europe, so the best mining permit place in the world, because I mean that permits shouldn't be granted easily, but there should be a certain processes which you can trust on, and this one-stop shop which Maria has been putting, and CRMA we are not there, but we are on the way. So why don't we look also in Finland? There's lots of discussions whether this one-stop shop and this CRMA, which certain project being more preferential than others, are there enough really authorities workforce for that? And there, and it's improvement in Finland now that instead of regional sort of experts, we will have a land-wide experts who are, for example, in dams and waters experts, and therefore can do better permitting. Why wouldn't we join the forces? And another investor idea, which was asked, I've been asking, and I would bet that using artificial intelligence in permitting and in permit applications, that sounds probably ridiculous, but I spent 10 hours during the weekend proofreading our Natura report, which is to be filed next week. And I'm finishing that, I did maybe 50 markings or so. Artificial intelligence probably would have done it 10 minutes. So was it a good use of time? I don't know, but at least testing all, let's say, from the authorities' side to pick up the things which need to be addressed could be used there then. So maybe that is an area where Nordic countries or Finland and Sweden we could work together.
Thank you very much, Pertti. I give you a big hand. And Charlotte is now taking over here with your difficult questions compared to mine.
It's very easy questions compared to yours. Since we are sort of running out of time here, it's been very interesting. But I think we learned a bit more about the status of the CRMA, so thanks a lot about that, Maria. And we also got some good ideas to add to our roadmap. I think that was very nice. And how to do a sustainable mining project then, I guess. So a very brief question. So is the next thing we do a joint Nordic roadmap?
Hopefully.
Sure, yeah.
It should have already been done, but never too late.
Exactly. So what do you think about that, Maria, from a European Union perspective?
So yes, we a little bit touching upon the circularity side. I mean, there was an excellent report from the Nordic Council of Ministers on circularity of CRM in the Nordics. So absolutely, we would look forward to that.
Okay, thank you. That's good. So thanks again to our last speakers. Very nice having you here. Thank you. So some final words, Magnus. What have we learned today?
You told me you were going to do all that. I think this last ideas of joint Swedish-Finnish cooperation supported by AI, isn't that something?
I think something was stressed today that I think we stressed already in the roadmap is collaboration. So I think that is something that we can continue with after this. And I hope you all have enjoyed this day. And we all look forward to continue this discussion, maybe in a Nordic roadmap. But none the least today, after this session, where there will be some drinks and something to eat outside this room. And for all of you online, we say thank you for today. And welcome to our next seminar. Let's say it like that.
Absolutely. The Academy is planning to continue the work in this area. Yeah. So we count on all your cooperation with us.
And a final thank you to all the participants and speakers here today that have traveled, some of you very far, to come here. So thanks a lot for contributing to this. Thank you.